Today, I want to talk about the core value that you gotta have and the core values that you need to get rid of. So we all have some form of core value. We hear the word core value get thrown a lot in business, but hey, you should have a life core value for yourself too as well. But a lot of us don't think about it. We just think that, oh, this business has this core value, customer first and, honesty, transparency, all of this and that is great, but do they really live by it? Core values are the root of your belief. They serve as your guiding principle that shapes your attitude, your action, and your decision in life. This will then guide a lot of your behavior. Now, your values are pretty much ingrained inside of you, and it develop over time and become subconscious as a big part of who you are. Now, when you understand how important it is to have the right value in your life, you start developing those values. And, when you have the right core values, you experience, personal growth, healthier relationship, and, of course, better decision making, right? That's why we're here, right? We want to make better decisions. Every day we want to make better decisions so that we can get closer to the goals, the dreams that we have. Now, just remember, your values are not locked in place. They are always changing. So if you're not intentional about changing the core values or keeping the core values that are positive or constructive, and instead of, just letting all the values float around, it could be destructive ones that you don't know about. They could lead you down a path that pretty much makes your life a lot harder than it should be. So a destructive core value can have negative impact on your thoughts, your feeling, your behavior, and your relationships with others. You'll start having negative self-talk, low self-esteem. You start doing the behavior that are bad for you. You have bad attitudes, and maybe you might be, offended easily. You become like standoffish with other people, right? Destructive core values are developed through your past experience, how you grew up, your culture, and through your relationship. So for me, I grew up in an Asian household, so there was some core value that I follow, which is families first. Family is important. Not losing face. If you guys are Asian, you understand not losing face, right? Yeah, that's a big thing. Like, don't look bad in front of other people. And so it doesn't matter how broke you are, you still rolling around in the Gucci bags or fancy shoes, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? Flexing so hard. That's why not losing face is. You don't want to show off. You don't want to show people your real life situation. And so that's one of my value. Well, it's not my value, but that was the cultural value that I used to have. I don't have those anymore. So an example, like if you grew up in a very competitive environment, you may develop a core value of like superiority, right? Or the need to control others in order to succeed. Like, let's say what's winning and you want to control everybody. So now you want to control everything. That's destructive core value. The opposite of this is, let's say if you grew up with experiencing a lot of trauma or abuse, you develop a core value of victimhood, victim mentality, right? We hear about victim mentality all the time, but it's still from a core value of victimhood, approval seeking as a way to cope with feeling of powerlessness and insecurity. So, if you grew up in a gang-related environment, your value be violence, right? It's simple as that. Like, hey, this is how I'm going to communicate the solution. Let's go through it through violence. And that's a very simple, like these are some of the basic destructive core values, right? You guys getting this? Destructive core values. You don't recognize core value, raise your hand if you get it. Like destructive core values exist in your life, even though you don't think that it's bad. But some of those exist and it controls a lot of your behavior. So let's talk about how you find out your destructive core value. The fun part, right? The first thing you need to do is, spend time to reflect regularly and ask yourself what is causing you to stress. What is stopping you from reaching your potential? What are the habits that you need to change? Because a lot of the habit that we have comes from our core value. Habits are a reflection of what we value, even if they are destructive or negative. Even if they're positive, right? All habits are a reflection of what you value. That's why you operate this way. It's like an operation manual. This is how we operate. This is how I decide things because of my values. And most of the time, people live and continue to live this way without being aware of the negative, destructive core values that create negative habits. And this is all based on those destructive values. So, what are some examples of destructive core values? Control. We think that control is a good thing, but the truth is, control can be very destructive. I guess I'll share a story with you. It was the funniest thing. So I have this friend. He runs this I don't know, $100 million software business, and he married this woman. So he married this woman. He didn't learn from the first marriage. He got into another relationship. I'm not saying anything bad about that. He thought he found his true love, but then he failed to realize that this woman also have other behavior habits that he didn't expect. And so when he married her, they started living together. A lot of the things that she was doing was controlling. She lost her friends because she wanted to control. So her friends wanted to surprise her for her birthday. And she was like, no, don't surprise me. Right? You ever met somebody who's like, don't surprise me. I don't want any surprises. Well, she grew up with a lot of trauma, a lot of struggle, a lot of what unexpected things happen, and she's so fearful of that. And so she wants to control the information. She wants to control the event. She wants to control everything. And when her friends didn't allow her to do that, and they were just trying to do this, out of the kindness of their heart, she pretty much destroyed that whole relationship. And so they're not friends anymore. But that's control, like being overly controlled. Like, even though, you do what she tells you, she's like, that's not good enough, right? Because she's not the one doing it herself. So that's what control is, believing that you have to control everything. Why? Because inside you're afraid. And so you develop this core value that I have to control everything so that I can feel secure. Of course, intoxication, it's okay. Here's a value. I need to be drunk to have a good time. Greed, I need more money to be happy. Approval seeking, like, I have to make somebody else happy for them to like me. Victimhood, you guys already know victim mentality. Like, hey, it's always, I'm always the victim. They did this, they did that, they blaming, and another destructive one is perfectionism. Always making sure that things are done right. Like, it has to be perfect before I start doing something, right? Dude, when I started, I'm gonna tell you the truth, I was not a perfectionist. Man, I just do it and I put it out there. Sometimes it doesn't work out the way I wanted to, but that's how you get things done. And thank goodness I didn't have perfectionism in my life. Because if I did, I would not be here speaking to you guys today, because, dude, starting a business is not perfect. Living life is not a perfect thing. I'm not perfect. You guys are not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Only God is perfect. So, you saying, hey, I want to be perfect. Like, you're trying to be God. Like, that's too much pressure. Like, you'll collapse under that pressure. So, number 7, lack of accountability. 8, attention seeking. 9, pridefulness. And 10, stubbornness. These are all core values that you might not be aware of. There's hundreds of lists. You can go on Google and look at what are destructive core values that are out there. There's lists of it. And you can go through the list and decide and choose, like, whoa, like, that resonates with me. If any of those connect with you guys, raise your hand. Like, raise your hand now if you have something that connects with you in those lists, right? Approval seeking, victimhood, perfectionism, lack of accountability, attention seeking, greed, intoxication, control, right? The destructive core values exist in all of us. So you have to spend time examining it. And I do spend time examining it because that's how I want to change, right? I want to improve my values, change my values so that I can choose the right values that will give me closer to my fullest potential. So what about the good values, the good core values? Don't worry, we got a few lists of that for the good ones too. There's not always bad. There's always the opposite of bad. There's good. So constructive core values. Some of these values I have in my own life. For me, I put God first. I used to didn't do this, but I slowly changed my value, and now I put it on a list and say God is first in my life. Number 2, humility, be more humble. Number 3, growth mindset. People don't think that you gotta say it. You gotta want to have a growth mindset. You don't just wake up and say, hey, I have a growth mindset. No, you have to want to have a growth mindset as part of your value. Number 4, more wisdom. Number 5, discipline. Number 6, commitment. Number 7, excellence, right? The crazy thing about excellence, why people don't have this, is because they were never exposed to it, right? They don't know what excellence look like. Like for me, I saw how my parents worked. That's one thing I did learn about them, is that they do their job the best that they could. They just slacked off. I don't know where they got this attitude from or where they have this core value from, but excellence is when you do something above and beyond, when it's not asked of you, right? Like for me, when I was washing dishes, I was the best dishwasher you ever seen. Like, man, I washed them dishes fast, clean and fast. That's what they needed me to do, and I'm going to do it. When I was busting tables, I made sure it's clean, spotless, no crumbs, making sure it's done right. And that's how you should treat your life. Like everything that you do should be done right. It's hard. Yes, I get it. But when you have that mentality of excellence, like I should do it right the first time versus doing it wrong the first time and then having to come back and fix it again, doing it wrong and then come back and fix it again. Just having the mentality that, hey, I want to do things right above and beyond. Let's just give my best effort. That's excellence. That's the value of excellence. Number 8, accountability, right? Just be accountable. Like, hey, if I made a mistake, if I did something wrong, for me, one of the things that I'm terrible at is sometimes I don't pay attention to the GPS and where I'm going. I usually make tons of U-turn. Like when I'm driving, I forget to, maybe I'm thinking about something and so my mind wander off. I'm thinking that's bad for driving, but I don't pay attention to the GPS, and then I'll make a U-turn, and sometimes my wife will be like, hey, go that way. And I'm like, what? No, this way is the right way. And then I'm going and I'm like, oh, shoot. I used to get really defensive about that, and then I started learning how to be accountable for my own actions. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Let me make a U-turn. I'm sorry. Be humble about things. So being humble, having humility, and be accountable. I made a mistake. Number 10, compassion, right? 11, empathy. Like you can choose. There's so many constructive core values in your life. How do you want to live your life? So for me, my top 3 is humility, wisdom, God first. I also have many others like discipline, commitment, excellence, accountability. And for me, these are some of the things I dedicate my entire life to. Like you can start choosing the type of values you want to live by every single day, right? Choose that. This is going to be the things that you do life for, right? For me, God first, always be grateful to God and lean onto God's strength. For me, humility, always open to receiving feedback and correction. That's how you're being humble. Like learn from people who are maybe more experienced and those who are just having different experience. It doesn't mean you can't learn from anybody. You can learn from a homeless person. Like for me, when I asked a homeless person how they got there, I learned something like, hey, let's not do that. This guy did a lot of drugs and this is where he is. Let's not do that. Or someone who's successful. This is what he did. He showed up and stayed consistent. He asked for help. When he don't know something, he find the person to help them find the answer, right? Like instead of like trying to figure a lot of things out on your own. You tried and you can't figure it out. Don't just do it on your own. Go find somebody else who can help you. That's a part of learning, growing, and being humble, right? Go out and seek advice, right? And of course, being disciplined, meaning keeping words to myself, keeping promises to myself. Having these set of rules that I'm going to follow. And sometimes I might not follow them all the way, and it's okay. I'm not a perfectionist. At least I'm trying. I get up and I try again. So core values are like rules and boundaries for your life. Everyone hates having rules, right? Like, don't we all hate rules, right? But if you want to live life successfully, you need to understand that rules are meant for your good, not to punish you. And I used to hate rules because my parents had a lot of rules. They never told me why I had to follow these rules, right? Now, when you understand why you have these rules in your life, you start creating rules that you follow and that you want to stick to because you understand that, hey, these rules will help me do this. Like, there's a rule for this, right? Yeah, a standard. Like, this is how you're going to live. This is the values that I'm going to live by. This is the standard that I'm going to live, right? So, how do you change a destructive core value to a productive one? Now, changing a core value can be challenging, very complex, but it's not impossible. It requires commitment, support from the people around you, some self-awareness, and it will happen, right? As we're growing into maturity, remember, just because you're 50 years old, 60 years old, doesn't mean you're mature. Doesn't mean you're a mature person. I have met people who are at that age, and I thought they were mature, but they're not. So age doesn't determine your level of maturity. Wisdom does. Wisdom, humility, experiences, that's where you become mature, is when you start having self-awareness for things. And then when you have the ability to decide which value you want to get rid of and which one you want to make a part of your life for the rest of your life, that's when you start growing in that level of maturity, right? We all want to be mature, right? I want to be mature. I'm still growing right now. Well, raise your hand if you want to be mature, because maturity gives you a different level of thinking, a different way of thinking. So let's talk about the step to chase the negative core values in your life, and start living life more productively. I'm not saying you guys are not productive right now, but we can always learn to be better every day. Always learning to be better. So number one, first, be aware. Identify the core values. First step in becoming good at anything is you got to know what you're bad at, right? Somebody have to tell you, or you have to sit there and really reflect, like, what are my destructive core values, my bad core values that I want to get rid of? Make a list of that, and then make a list of the good ones that you want to start applying. Once you identify the core values, then you make a commitment to those things, right? Tips for finding out destructive core values: learn from others. Read stories, get perspective, ask, or just really see the example of someone who has core value. Like, I remember there was a time where I was like YOLO. It was like, you only live once. And I totally did not understand that. But there was a moment in my life that I was YOLOing everything. Like, man, let's go out, go hard or go home, right? It was like, man, let's go party and just stay up till like 6 a.m. I don't care. Let's just do all the crazy things that we want to do. We're going to live once in our life, so let's just do whatever. Who cares, right? Who cares the people we hurt? Who cares the relationship we damage? Who cares? Let's just go out and party and have a good time. That was YOLO. And, pretty much you can YOLO into a hole, pretty much, if you continue to live that lifestyle. I promise you, your life's not going to go anywhere if you YOLO like that. But that was a mentality. That was a value that people had back then. And you piling up credit card debts because you're going on all these trips. You only live once, so let's go on this $50,000 trip, right? YOLO. So think about all the traits of a life that you don't want. See what their values are. Like for me, I value commitment. I value honesty. I value discipline, right? So think about what the values that you have. And of course, for me, pride is one of those things where I'm always fighting. Like, I don't want that to be a value that I have, because pride is like ego, arrogance. Those things stop you from learning. So if you guys have something like that, make sure you identify that and really put it away and start learning how to put that away and start leaning towards how to be humble, how to have humility, because that's where you learn and gain wisdom. So number two, it leads us to challenging the negative core value. Question it. Is it really helping you out in your life? It might have helped a certain time, but it might not be helping you now. So we're always growing. Growth mindset is about, learning to do something new so that we can start doing things better currently in our life. That's why we're always growing. So I have a growth mindset value. And what that means is that in every stage of my life, there's always something to learn. I'm always hungry to learn, to understand, to get wisdom from other people. I was at an event with John Maxwell. Funny story, I saw him in the urinal. Anyway, it was the weirdest thing. I saw him in the urinal. I was like, hey, how's it going? I didn't know it was John Maxwell. We just having a conversation standing in the urinal. But anyway, he was up there speaking. Random story. I didn't even know it was him until the guy washing his hand, you're in the men's room, you do your business. If you guys don't know John Maxwell, he wrote like 90 leadership books. He coached a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. He has this John Maxwell program. So this guy, he knows leadership. And he says you always have to have a growth mindset. That's what he says. Growth mindset is a constant learning, a constant hunger to get wisdom, a constant hunger to gain experience and knowledge. And so maybe 10 years ago, you might have learned something that helped you 10 years ago. But today, what is helping you grow, right? That's what growth mindset is. A fixed mindset is, I learned that, I'm good, now I'm not going to change. That's a fixed mindset. You don't want to be stuck in a fixed mindset because you're not going to move forward. Remember, a tree is always growing. If a tree is not growing, it is dying. It doesn't matter how fast or slow a tree grows, it will always grow. Like during a drought, the tree is growing very small. How do you know this? You go look at the tree rings. Go chop down a tree and look inside, and this tree rings. And each year represents if this tree has abundance of, food, nutrients, water, and it grows really fast. And then there's times where the tree has very thin lines close together. That means the tree are struggling, there's drought, there's hardship, there's stress from the environment. A tree is always growing. I'm not saying go out, cut down a tree, but you can go on YouTube and they'll explain to you how a tree grows, and you will understand. A tree is always growing, and we're like trees. We will always grow. If we're not growing, we'll eventually die. Okay? So, make sure you guys have a growth mindset. Choose a core value that pushes you to grow. Okay? And, of course, number 3, replace a core value with growth mindset. Honestly, all of us here should have a growth mindset. So replace the core value. You cannot get rid of a negative core value and not replace it with something new. Like anything in your life, if you want to replace a habit, you better find a new habit to replace it with. If you have a bad habit, how to replace it with a good habit? You can't get rid of an old habit, man. If it's going to be very hard. Like if one of your habits is going out and drinking with friends on a Friday, you can't just stop doing that, because you're going to start feeling depressed and be like, hey, what happened? My life's not fun anymore. Like, fill it with something else, like hang out with friends who do sports, and you replace that. And that's how you replace destructive habits with positive habits. And then the last thing is, of course, you got to practice this. And that's where it's hard, is like when you learn something, when you become aware of something, and when you commit to a value that you want to live by, you have to practice it every day. You have to ask yourself, am I practicing this daily? Set your goals, your action behind those values. Be consistent, and over time, they will be a part of your life. I used to didn't have this growth mindset. But, when I was introduced to personal development, when I really was at the low part of my life where I didn't know where I was going, I didn't know what I want, I had no confidence, I was just depressed, when I started discovering personal growth and that I can take control of my life, that's when I started being consistent about reading, listening. I exposed myself to all of those knowledge and wisdom from people who, were growing. So exposure, right? You got to practice. Put those things around you. Like for me, I was listening to a lot of Tony Robbins tape, man. I used to have these old DVDs. Surprisingly, not DVDs, but like these CDs, right? I used to have these CDs before the MP3 players were really hot, right? They had CDs in the car, and that's what I listened to. Tony Robbins stuff. And I read Think and Grow Rich. And so I started exposing myself, changing, my knowledge and my exposure to like more personal growth mindset, because this is the value that I want. I want to change. I want to be better. So my point is, when you live your life with strong values, you'll make more winning decisions. That's really it. Like if you have good values, you will have more winning decisions, right? Like who wants more winning decisions? I do. Raise your hand if you do. I do. Dude, like that's what life is about. It's about making the right decision every single day. Like there's days you wake up and you're like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sleep in bed. And I get it. That happens to me too. Every single day. Every day at 5 a.m., I'm like, why do I need to wake up? And especially when it's this cold. Like, I don't want to wake up. Or when you don't want to go to work, when you don't want to show up for product research, you don't want to show up to class, you don't want to show up to a short presentation, you don't want to do something, you don't want to listen to that YouTube video, you want to watch Netflix instead. There's a show that I'm watching, right? You know, there's a show you're watching and you want to watch that show instead of watching something that could grow your mind. Like, it's hard. Yes, I get that. But when you have these core value that you're going to live by for the rest of your life, you have to really make that decision that, hey, if I make this decision, I'm going to win. If I make this correct decision, you have 24 hours to make those decisions. We all have 24 hours. How you use your 24 hours will decide your future. That's it. Life and business will be hard, so accept that. But when you grow, learn, and know how to make decisions because you have a strong core value that you plan to live your entire life, and it aligns, and every decision that you make aligns with your core value, I promise you, you will have more success. You will gain more success, more confidence, right? More success, more confidence, more results, whatever that may be for you guys, more results. But it has to be aligned with the core value that you have.